What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Countdown Scouting Network. I'm your host, Joey Garcia, and today we are going to get into the linebacker rankings for the 2024 NFL Draft. So, starting off, I will say this linebacker class, I think that there's a lot of depth in here. A lot of guys who I could see, being rotational or special teams guys, maybe some guys that are scheme specific, but there's not really, other than one guy in here, there's not really a stud linebacker that we've had in the past few drafts. So, but without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So, first guy we have on here is Jontre Hunter from Georgia State. So he is 6'2", 240 pounds, and he does a lot of things fairly well. I thought he was solid, covering in man, covering in zone. He was an okay run defender. I felt like he filled gaps fairly well, not as well as I would, really want and feel confident with him at a lower level. But it was fine enough when they sent him on delayed blitzes or outside on the edge. He did a fairly good job on pass rushing as well. I will say he missed an uncomfortably high amount of tackles, um, and so that's something I'm concerned with him moving to the next level. If you can't tackle, you can't play. That's really the biggest thing with linebackers is instincts and flow, and then tackling, 100%. So he kind of worried me with that, but again, I just really like his willingness to stick his nose in things. So let's go to the next guy. We have Trevin Wallace from Kentucky. He's a nice thick boy, 6'1", 6'2", 240 pounds again. Um, but he ran fairly well at the combine. He moves decently, but there's just nothing really special I see with him. He doesn't miss too many tackles. He I wouldn't say that he's a sure tackler by any means, but he doesn't miss too many tackles. He just does everything fine. And in the SEC level, being able to cover decently against these quick, skilled guys, being able to tackle uh, these big running backs, being able to shed blocks from these elite big offensive linemen in the SEC is impressive. So I think he's probably a special teamer and someone that he might be able to rotate in every day. But he's a day three guy as well. So um, going to my next guy. I know you guys are gonna love when I say this one because I'm gonna butcher the name. I apologize. Adefon Olufashio, I believe is how you say it, and I apologize for that one if I didn't pronounce it right. But he's a little bit of a smaller but dense linebacker. But I really enjoyed his tape at like 6 foot. He's between 6 foot, 6'1", and about 230 to 235 pounds, somewhere in that range. But he moves really well. He I think coverage is probably his best attribute. I would say almost like a Duke Riley, if you remember Duke Riley, uh, who's been in the league for probably 6, 7 years now, who's just a very, very comfortable in zone. Man to man, he's not the greatest in man to man, and he can fill the run as well. He can move side to side. So I'm very interested in this Washington guy. But again, it's just the run game, the scraping over top ability is just not really fully there for me to feel confident in him being an all-time starter. But on third and longs and you got to drop in his zone, this is a guy who I can definitely see taking that role on a team. All right, moving over to Curtis Jacobs from Penn State. This is an elite athlete. He's 6'1", 230 pounds, and he's just rocked up. Really elite athlete. It's just his. It's almost like the instincts just aren't there. So there's some times where he's very late to fill a hole in the run. There's other times where he doesn't really know where he's supposed to be in zone. I can see that he's got the athleticism. The instincts really just aren't there yet, and that worries me are they ever going to be there? So that's kind of my thing is, are they ever going to be there? I don't know. I like how athletic he is. Worst case scenario, he's a special teams ace. I really think he can do a lot of damage on special teams. Moving into the next guy, we have Tyron Hopper from Missouri. This is a guy who can play a little bit of edge. I wouldn't always have him down at the edge, especially he's about 6'2", 230, so he's a little bit undersized. Um, but if you're trying to get a lot of guys out there to just rush out after the quarterback, he's someone that you might be able to put down there a little bit. I would love for him to put about 15 pounds on for before you think about doing that. Um, but he's a run stopper. He's a thumper. He's a decent tackler. I think he's got very, very high motor. I think the instinct's there as well, but I don't know if he's a good enough athlete. He struggles in coverage, scraping sideline to sideline. Sometimes he gets, excuse me, my nose is a little itchy. Sometimes he gets caught on some guards that are moving to the second level. It's almost like he doesn't have that quick twitch muscle. The instincts are there, and he starts trying to fire. He just really can't move sideline to sideline as well as I would want him to. I think he's going to be fine. I think he's an adequate number 3 linebacker on your team, a rotational guy, someone that's going to play 25 snaps for you. If someone goes down and he was your number 3, number 4, and he has to move up to be a number 2 and play 80% of your snaps, there might be a little bit of trouble. I feel like Jack, Jack, who was the guy for Chicago? He was a 6th round pick. He was in Chicago 2 years ago. Sanborn, Jack Sanborn. That's kind of what I feel like with Tyron Hopper. He's not the most athletic, but he's got good enough instincts. He wants to be a headhunter. That's kind of what I feel with him, a Jack Pyburn. I think he was a 6th, not Jack Pyburn, excuse me, Jack Sanborn, 6th round pick. I think that's kind of the vibe I get with Tyron Hopper. I think that's probably my comp for him. Let's go over to Omar Speights. If you remember, Omar Speights from LSU was at Oregon State. He was in my top 5 linebackers coming into the summer scouting, going into the season. He's dropped down on here significantly, but if you remember, the thing with him was he's a good zone defender. He's not great against the run, but he's very athletic. And he kind of proved to be that at LSU. Going up against these offensive linemen from the SEC kind of took him out of position a lot of the times. It seemed like he didn't really get that first step, the initial quickness to hit the hole once he realized what it was and to be able to scrape over top. So I have a lot of concerns with that. I think, again, this is another guy who I can tell my guys, hey, this is a core special teamer, and he's a guy that's willing to grind his butt off to be, my LB5 on my roster. All right, let's get into Steel Chambers over here. This is, again, it's, let's see. Yeah, I mean, Steel Chambers is another guy who, I kind of like I don't really like the size profile of him, but I think he's another guy who, if you get him as core special teamer, he's about 6'1", 230. He's kind of in that same Curtis Jacobs kind of frame where I feel really comfortable on third downs being able to throw him out there in zone coverage. He wants to come up and hit. So I'm not I don't want to say scared, but I'm confident that he'll be able to play a role in this team. But if he's a guy that I can't trust if it's a run, you're going to be able to. It's going to be very hard to try to find a spot for him to play on a team whenever you can't really trust that he's, not going to be a liability out there if they end up deciding to not pass the ball and it ends up being a draw and a run, and all of a sudden he's got guards coming at him and he can't really do anything. So let's go to Nathaniel Watson. This is a guy who is one that you want to be first off the bus. 6'2", 245 pounds, just absolutely jacked. I mean, there's almost no body fat on this guy. You love watching him play. He has a missed tackle rate of 5.4. 5.4 missed tackle rate is ridiculous. It's an elite stat. 5.4 missed tackle rate. Um, and uh, he's a guy who I don't know if he really deserves to be only number 14 on this list. I had some troubles because I really don't think, I don't think that he's great on third downs, and I think this is a passing league. Man coverage, you don't want to put him man to man even against the tight end. Zone coverage, he's okay to adequate, I would say. But really on first and second downs, this is where he loves to make a statement. Uh, if you want to send him on a blitz on third down and it's a passing down, 100%, he's great at that. If you need someone to make a stop, he's going to make a stop. But he just doesn't really have a feel in zone, and his man to man really is a liability. So that's kind of why I have him down here. Again, he's a guy who he has a role. If you can find a role, if you're Brian Flores and you're looking to find a role, kind of like an Ivan Pace Jr., that's what I feel like with Nathaniel Watson. Ivan Pace Jr. is probably a really good comp, to be honest with you. All right, here's a guy I have up here for athleticism. Again, this right now we're in day 3 to undrafted free agent, undrafted free agent territory. So I didn't really know where to put this guy. I really, really enjoy his traits. I don't know what to do with him. So he's a very lanky guy. I think you can put some weight on him. Jordan Maggie from Temple, 6'3", about 220 pounds, I believe, and he looks it. He looks fairly skinny. I don't really know where you put him though. He's long, he's rangy. He does a good job on man-to-man coverage, as you would expect at only 220 pounds. He moves very well. He can come up and hit as well for that size. I was very surprised, but just anytime an offensive lineman gets their hands on him, it's trouble. And I never saw them really let him rush off the edge. I really wish that they let him rush off the edge a little bit more. They sent him on some blitzes, which if he was going full steam on blitzes and stunts that they were doing, it's awesome. But I just want to see him maybe line up on the edge a little bit. Uh, but so I don't really know what to do. I think he's a guy, again, another special teamer, and he's got the athletic. I don't really know what to do with him. So I put him down at 21. You could probably argue him up to, yeah, about 13. I think I put him at the height of that tier, and then we go to the next tier. So Jason Henderson from Old Dominion. Really the only big thing I have against him is that he was at Old Dominion. He didn't really have that much good film to watch, film against quality opponents to watch. So he's a big boy though. He's like 6'2", 245. He covers very well. He's instinctual in the zone, and he comes up. He makes some hits. He fills gaps very well. Sideline to sideline might be a little bit of an issue. I don't know if it's an instincts thing where he just can't process the play recognition, and get downhill, or get scraping across. But other than that, I think he's almost a full linebacker. I just don't know if it's instincts. That's why he's down here so low. I can't tell if he can react quick enough. That's really the big thing with him. Let's go over to Tommy Eichenberg, the second Ohio State linebacker we have on here. This is one I was really, really excited about going into after summer scouting, going into the season. So last year he played really, really well. This year he's been dealing with injuries, but he was playing through the injuries, so you got to love that. I think I'm probably a little too low on him here, but his missed tackle rate jumped up a little bit this year, but it was still really good. I think he had a shoulder injury that he was working with. Sorry, I keep looking down here at this camera, forgetting that this camera is plugged in. So I apologize with that. But yeah, he had a shoulder injury, and he was still very good. 8% missed tackle rate. His coverage grade dropped tremendously though, so that's a little bit of an issue. Again, I thought it was a shoulder injury. It might have been a knee injury, but other than that, he was still scraping over top decently well. He wasn't as fast at reacting as he was last year, so I'm thinking it might have been a lower body injury that he was dealing with. But I think this is probably a guy who goes in the fifth round and ends up being one of those adequate level starters that we look at the linebacker position later on. There's not really anything that he doesn't do well. It's just this last year was very disappointing, and that's kind of why I have him down here. Is just I don't know if he's ever going to be that junior class Tommy Eichenberg anymore. So I don't want to knock him for playing through an injury, but that's kind of what I've done. Even though I said I didn't want to do that. I still did that. I still ended up doing that. So let's go to one of my favorite. This is my guy right here. One of my favorite linebackers in this class, Darius. I call him Musa. I don't really know how to say his name, but I call him Darius Musa. Um, he is a little small, 6 foot, 6 foot and a half, 230 pounds. But the really big thing I have with him, and again, he's 230 pounds. Hopefully, he can put on 10 pounds, and that might help. 10 pounds of muscle is his tackle rate. His missed tackle rate is what's really docking him. Other than that, um, his ability to plug a hole, his ability to scrape over top, his instincts, his being able to just rush the passer. They didn't, they put him on the defensive line, not a lot, but they put him on there probably about 10% of the time. And the other times he's blitzing. His blitz rate's really, really well. And man-to-man coverage on tight ends, he's fairly good against tight ends, even for only being 6 feet tall. At the next level, you probably don't want that to happen too often, depending on the tight end, but he does well in zone coverage as well. I think his coverage ability is probably his best ability. Now, with his size, with his missed tackle rate, he's probably going to be a day 3 prospect. But I really, really like this kid. I think he can play. He kind of reminds me of Aubrey Miller from Jackson State last year, who was an undrafted free agent who really didn't get any play time at all. He stayed on the practice squad all year, but that's just kind of the guy I see. He's fairly athletic. He's not going to blow you out the waters with his athleticism, but he moves really well, really smooth, comes up and hits, but he's just a little undersized. All right, let's go to Jalen Ford. 6'3", 240 pounds, and he has room to put. I mean, really, I don't think he's fully developed yet. I really don't. He is a senior, but man, I really don't think he's fully developed. From Texas, this is a guy from Texas. Um, a very good run stopper. That's what he does best. His coverage grade, probably his worst attribute, but I didn't think his coverage grade was terrible. I really didn't think his coverage skills are that bad. I think if you want to put him man to man on tight ends, depending on the tight end, it's going to be a disaster. If he's at the next level and you're asking him to guard Travis Kelce, it's going to be bad. But if it's an average tight end, if you ask him to guard like an Austin Hooper, a Jonnu Smith, someone like that who's an average tight end, he's got really good length to be able to match up man to man against these guys. And his zone coverage, it leaves some to be desired, but he just plays with a ton of heart. He fills holes. He tackles well. I really like the kid, and he just plays with a little bit more juice than some of these other guys down here that we talked about. That like a Nathaniel Watson, how we talked about him, and just his coverage grade was also not very good, but he just didn't have the juice that Ford had. All right, here we go. We are getting into some of these guys that should be rotational or number 2 guys starting the year, in my opinion. So let's get to Bertrand. JD Bertrand is another smaller guy, but he doesn't play like it. He's more condensed. Um, he is 6'1", 235 pounds, and he plays juiced up. Very good coverage grade, as you would expect. Anyone in the 230s, if you aren't a good cover guy, that's probably detrimental. He plays really well in coverage. He can play man. He plays a lot of zone, and he's very, very good at zone coverage. He fills the run. He's very instinctual. I'm trying to think of a linebacker that he reminds me of. I can't really think of it. But they also put him on the defensive line a little bit, let him rush off the edge, let him rush through the A gaps on blitzes. He shows blitz, and he has success rate. He doesn't show blitz and he delays and he has success rate. Very good blitzing linebacker. Causes havoc from A gap to A gap, but he also is decent at shedding over to the side. So I think his real negative is one, his size, and then yeah, honestly, I think his size and his pure athleticism is probably detrimental to his long-term high-end success, but I do really like him. Let me get to the other Notre Dame linebacker, Maurice Luffy. Luffy? I don't know. Maris Laffy. Say his name a couple different ways just to get it right. So he is 6'2", 240 pounds. He's a little bit of an older prospect, but again, he is a guy who is much like I think Bertrand is very good in zone coverage, and he's an okay man-to-man guy. Luffy, Luffy is I think he's an elite man-to-man guy, 6'2", 240, but he's got long arms, and I think he's a good zone guy as well. I think that's probably his best trait is his ability to cover. So I think I really like it. You know, maybe his zone's not the best, but I think his zone is more than adequate, and I love his man-to-man. He's got very good instincts, comes downhill and just destroys guards trying to pull or get to the next level. He fills holes very, very quickly. I think he's got the instincts, and I think he's got enough athleticism that this is a guy who you probably grab in the 5th round. I don't really know if you get him before that. I don't know if I'd use more than a 5th round pick on him, and that's crazy that we're already in the top 7. I still don't know if I'd use a 4th round pick on him. So, all right, Cedric Gray was one of our top 5 guys, and he is such a leader in that UNC linebacker core. You know, he was kind of getting pushed around a little bit at this last level. At this last year. We talked about he's small, not small, but he's thin. He's 6'2", 230 pounds. We talked about how good his coverage skills were. He's a good coverage guy. His run this last year, if they got up to second level and he didn't fill the gaps, which didn't happen that often, he's very good at filling gaps. But if you get an offensive lineman, a guard, moving up to the next level towards him, and he hasn't already started coming downhill, and they get their hands on him, it's over. He does a fairly decent job scraping over top. I think this is a guy that his first couple years, you can blitz him, you can put him in coverage. I don't think he's an everyday linebacker, but I think he can get into being one of those. I think he's probably got the highest ceiling out of all the guys that we've talked about. But I think really his size and frame, he's an older prospect, but I think he can put on another 15, maybe even 20 pounds. I think he's a guy that at 6'2.5", 250 pounds would still be able to move very, very well. Again, I don't know if he'll get up to that weight. I just need him to, get just slightly stronger where he doesn't have to rely on his instincts and his first step quickness to get him in a good spot where he's not going to lose a one-on-one against the guard. So that's kind of my big thing with him. All right, Michael Barrett. This is a guy that I really like. I like both of these Michigan linebackers a lot. I like Junior Colson a little bit better, but I don't think Michael Barrett is getting enough. I don't think he's getting enough praise for how well he plays. So he is another. He's not a smaller linebacker. He's 6 foot, 240 pounds. So the 6 foot is the thing that's really concerning people because usually with the height comes the arm length. I think his arm length is a little small, which concerns me as a linebacker, but it doesn't concern me enough just due to the fact that everything he does is awesome. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Channing Tindall. I think he was a fourth round pick a few years ago from Georgia, that Georgia defense that had Nakobe Dean and all those guys, Channing Tindall, who's just kind of bricked up but moves very well, super athletic. He's super athletic, bricked up, a little bit short hands. His instinct needs to get there, but man, I think this is just a guy that he's a ball player. He really is. He's a ball player. He guards well. He's super physical at the catch point. Anytime he meets if he meets a offensive lineman in a hole, he's going to blow through the hole. He meets a running back in the hole. I haven't seen anyone run him over head to head, one on one in a hole. He breaks down and tackles well in space. He moves well laterally. There's everything that he does is I don't want to say elite, but it's phenomenal. Everything that he does is phenomenal. It's just his arm size. That's really it. And then maybe he doesn't have that first step quickness all the time. He gets fooled a little bit on counter plays. But that's honestly with this class, I don't really know that many people that aren't going through. So again, not a great linebacker class, but this is my top 5. Let's go to Edgerrin Cooper, who really started raising up my board. I had to watch his tape. He's just, he's a guy that, I talked about Lufa, and Cedric Gray, and saying, I like Lufa, but Cedric Gray has probably the highest ceiling. Welcome to Edgerrin Cooper. So Edgerrin Cooper is a guy who is 6'3", 230 pounds, 22 years old, very, very athletic, and I think he can put a little bit more weight on his frame. I know I've said that about a couple of these guys, but this is a guy who's 6'3", 230. Probably, I would feel very comfortable if you told me that in 2 years he was 240 pounds. Very, very comfortable with that. Everything he does, if I told you Michael Barrett does everything very, very well to an elite level, Edgerrin Cooper is that as well. Super fiery player. I think Edgerrin Cooper is not done developing into being the linebacker that you want him to be. He really only has about 800 to 1,000 college snaps in his belt. And I love the way he plays. Everything I said about Michael Barrett, same thing applies to Cooper. I think he's a little bit more instinctual, though, than Barrett. So this is a guy I would use Barrett, probably a late third, fourth round guy. Edgerrin Cooper, if you told me he went in the second round, I would think it's a little crazy, but I can understand because it's like the Darius Leonard pick that Indianapolis did in the first round where everyone's questioning it. That's kind of how Cooper is. I don't want to say he's going to have a career like Leonard because that's crazy, but it's one of those where I wouldn't be surprised because of that. Okay, let's get to one that I think I'm a little bit higher on than everyone else. I don't know if it's just because of the way that he plays, but 6 foot tall, 235 pounds, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. from Clemson. He is just, it just feels like he does everything right off the field to set himself up on the field. He is the most instinctual player in this class. He's not the most athletic. He doesn't run the best time, but he's got very decent coverage skills, especially in zone coverage. He knows how to play from receiver to receiver and not just drop to grass in zone. I'm very impressed with that. He comes up and fills in the run very well. He can move laterally, even though he's not the most explosive or the most athletic guy. He moves well laterally very well, and I think it's because of his pre-snap recognition, his game. Like, I feel like he's a guy that studies tape. His dad played in the league, so that might help as well. But I just think that he does a good job of preparing for games because you can almost tell he knows the play at half the time before it even happens. So that's kind of why I like him. Yeah, he's a little undersized, but I don't think it's going to be an issue. I really don't. Okay, Junior Colson. Let's get to my man Junior Colson. He is 6'3", 248 pounds. He's a big boy. And not just being a big boy, he's a big boy that can run. He's a big boy that can cover. He's a big boy that can smash. Is he is such a fun tape to watch. I love Michael Barrett from Michigan. Junior Colson is a whole nother level. I really like Junior Colson. I think that's an early day 2 pick. Um, I think Peyton Wilson. We'll talk a little bit about Peyton Wilson. I don't want to go too long. Peyton Wilson is a guy that does everything right. If you think about Jack Campbell, I think he's better than Jack Campbell, who was picked by Detroit in the late first round. He was a first round pick. I think Peyton Wilson is better than that. The only thing with Peyton Wilson is some injury concerns. Now, Junior Colson from Michigan is not as explosive, not as aggressive, not as good of a tackler, but he is above average at every single one of those things. These two linebackers are easily way above everyone else in this class. So that's what I have for you guys today. I appreciate you sticking around for this video. I apologize if it's a little long, and we will get to cornerbacks here in a couple days. So if you guys enjoyed, go ahead and leave a like and hit subscribe, and go ahead and put down in the comment section if you disagree with any of this or if there's some linebackers I missed, because I know there's a lot of linebackers out there that I have missed. So appreciate you guys watching. Have a good day. Peace.